Fake PSA slabs and Evan Mathis trimming discussion points are once again front and center for us to talk to in a video. This time it is off the back of Jeremy Lee's podcast, his YouTube channel, Sports Card Live, where he had Jason Koonce, owner and founder of ISA, on there, where they basically talk through a lot of tough questions. We also had Evan Mathis in the comment section during the live asking lots of questions and answering them as well. I was participating. I thought it was a really, really good chat. But this is essentially what I'm referring to. If you haven't seen it, please check it out. It goes for about 2.5 hours. I thought it was really, really good. But like I alluded to at the very start, there was a few, talking points within this, specifically around fake slabs, and then some thoughts on the whole card trimming situation that I thought were really, really interesting. Now, before we get to the whole card trimming, topic, I want to touch on the fake slabs, because off the back of them talking about trimmed cards, Jason and then Evan down in the comments of the video essentially alluded to, or they may even in fact, explicitly stated this, is that PSA has a far bigger problem in the modern day with, fake slabs being produced out there than they are with actually trimmed cards. And they talk to this for a few different perspectives, one of which is because, the high-end, trim cards that you're sort of seeing with the Mickey Mantles, etc., it's a lot harder to do that these days because the supply's already been taken up and been trimmed and submitted. But they basically said there is, a cartel, which I think we've touched on, in the channel in the past when we've talked about fake slabs down in Mexico that are producing these things and are essentially, putting them out there into the market, and they're so well done that it's impossible to distinguish between the genuine ones or the fake ones, which I thought, was pretty interesting. And once again, a pretty scary thing for us as, collectors in this space, because basically, again, potentially buying something that is tainted or tarnished in your collection. One of the things that was pretty interesting off the back of this whole trimmed card situation was how many people have now sat back and said, okay, trimmed cards have been around forever. It's front of mind once again within the hobby because you guys are saying it's so pervasive. I've probably got trimmed cards in my collection. And that's what Jeremy Lee talked to in that video. It's what almost anyone with, decent cards in their collection, as in, expensive vintage cards, has basically alluded to as well. And that's quite a scary thing, but it's also okay for the individuals when you've basically got comfortable with that. You're basically saying, well, I've got them, so be it, sort of thing. It's bound to happen. But this whole fake slab situation is just a whole another dimension of, craziness, in my opinion, because I think we've touched on the ones in the past. There was the whole WeWag situation where the grip submitter was basically using, fake slabs or slabs out the back door from somewhere out at PSA and replacing cards in them, keeping the good cards, i.e. the higher grade card, and putting in lower inferior cards or fake cards in those slabs. And that stuff seemed to have got dealt with, but all of that appeared to be happening, onshore in America. But what these guys are alluding to are the ones that are sort of happening, internationally via Mexico. And they also say it's basically tied to the cartel. So be very careful with my words there. Jason and Evan in the comments were, again, very hesitant to talk about this themselves. So it is a pretty scary situation, but the volume of things they were talking about is like next level. It's talking about something that is potentially so pervasive within the hobby that you've probably got a significant number of fake slabs out there in the market that are so well done that nobody really knows. And it's a pretty, a scary situation. I'll say that once again. To PSA's credit, we've talked to this before as well. They've done a really good job in the last few years investing in new slab designs and also new label designs and things like that. I've got one here, which I think is only new in the last few months, actually, and that is their, thicker slab. So this is a Diego Costa Flawless Soccer, first tier soccer, only year soccer. Flawless, it's hard to tell on camera, but it's like a tiered case. I can't really show it to you, but apparently that's new, and there's some new, technology in the way the slab is structured. It's really hard to, glue these back together. It's really hard to, mimic the way it's produced. Now, again, basically can send a card to China, as a few people alluded to in the comments, and you can get any mold made. So it is what it is. But to PSA's credit, I'll say that once again, they've invested a lot of time in trying to update their slabs on a consistent basis, but also their labels. So from their perspective, they try to do a really good job in this space. But to see the level of concern, I'd say, from Jason and then also Evan, raises a few questions in terms of, okay, how much success is PSA actually having in this space trying to stop this kind of thing? Now, I know, some of you with common sense will say, well, Daniel, Jason Koonce, he's the owner of ISA. Evan Mathis has a vendetta against PSA based on the things he's, done with his recent videos and things like that. So they're just saying that to probably spook the market with regards to, PSA, which, might be fair. But at the same time, I don't know if it was coming at it from that perspective. It seems fairly balanced. And it's also not just them talking about these. There's other trusted people out there like Sports Card Radio have talked to this as well. A few others in the hobby that you could say, okay, there is no vested interest from them. They've got nothing to gain by calling up PSA. So because these guys are also saying it, there's probably some truth to it. So again, take their comments with a grain of salt, but also keep that stuff front of mind. So I'm really keen to get your thoughts on this as well, whether you've seen, Fake Slabs yourself, or whether you know any more information about this. I think there was some threads on the blowout forums that were, surprise, surprise, deleted as well. But I thought it was, a really interesting point that maybe hasn't been talked to as front and center as maybe it should be. Now, what was also interesting was the whole trimming card situation within this video. Once again, I'll show it up on screen. And one thing that was I thought was pretty interesting was that Jason, who, like I think I touched on at the very start of this video, has allegations and accusations towards him about card trimming. And he's had this for multiple decades in the hobby. And you go to Sports Card Radio's website, they'll talk about it. You go to Blowout Forums, you'll see it there. These are all allegations as far as I know. I don't think he's ever been directly proven to have trimmed a card in the past. But what I found interesting was, you've got history between him and Evan Mathis, right? Sports Card Radio continually talk about how Jason is the one that taught Evan how to trim cards. What I found interesting within this was Jason sort of distancing himself from that relationship with Evan in an extent, implying that he doesn't know much about the trimming situation in that respect. He doesn't know why Evan put out the video. Like, I think these guys are a little bit closer than what Jason alluded to in that video. Now, I'm not saying Jason lied in this live stream because he did answer a lot of tough questions, so he deserves some credit for that. I just don't think he was as transparent as, he probably could have been. I think a lot of people were also agreeing with that kind of mindset in the comments. So go back and watch it yourself or let me know what you think. I would have liked to have seen Jason answer some, tougher questions. One thing that concerned me a little bit was his comments around how shocked he was about how positive the response was, to people being accepting of this card trimming situation. Like me being a critical thinker, me putting a tinfoil hat on. Now, I know critical thinking, tinfoil hats don't go hand in hand, but my first thought process on this was, okay, well, you've got Jason Koonce with allegations around card trimming. You've got Evan Mathis with allegations around card trimming happening for many years, many threads on Blow Up, many articles on Sports Card Radio, many videos talked about it in the past, whispers around the hobby in the US based on what people have told me for many, many years. Was that video by Evans something for him to test the waters within the hobby to see what people are susceptible to see what people are accepting now, to see what the sentiment is within the hobby to deem, okay, what is okay and not okay from card trimming and card restorations? I think, like I said, critical thinking, tinfoil hat, yes, that's probably what happened here. And like, if you were to suggest these guys, do have these card trimming allegations against them, is this something they collaborated on and worked on in the background to sort of see what would be happening? I'm not sure. But I think it's a nice question to ask, and it's one that I'd like to push a little bit further on with Jason. Now, again, we're not accusing anyone of anything, right? It's more so having that deeper discussion because I think it's a fair thing to try and ask. I think they, once again, both of them talk to SGC being the most consistent grader these days, which, again, I thought was a pretty interesting one. I sort of said this in the last video where was Evan talking about SGC being the most consistent, purely him saying that? I think this was off the back of the Sports Card Nonsense podcast. Was that him saying that because he wants people to feel comfortable submitting to SGC because, they know that SGC are not as good at maybe spotting trim cards, or they have a way in to grade with SGC because they're, banned by, PSA, as in Evan is. I don't think Jason is. But is that why they're saying that? Like, that's another question you need to sort of be asking. It sort of sucks, like, to be talking about, this kind of stuff within the hobby all the time. But these are the questions I ask myself all the time. These are the questions I want you guys to start asking. And I think most of you probably do if you watch my content, if you watch Raul's content, AIH Sports, if you watch Sports Card Radio, if you watch Sports Card Dad, asking these kinds of questions is not a bad thing, right? It does better for you as an individual. It's not negative to push back on people, which is why I'll give, Jason some credit for this interview, because Jeremy did ask him some very, very tough questions. And Jeremy has copped heat in the past, maybe being too nice to sponsors or being too nice to guests, but those questions were tough, and Jason did answer them, maybe not, super transparently as he probably could have, but he did answer them. And it's a good thing that he came on to answer those things, because it's another thing we've spoken about within this hobby in the past, but that's what we need more of, right? I talked to, Nat Turner doing an okay job of that at times, but he's sort of fallen away in that space. We need more open dialogue like this with people like Jason that are pretty, prevalent in the hobby, even if it's like I say, being a small business compared to the others. You want people to sort of be talking about this. You want this stuff to be asked. You want this transparency to you as an individual within the market, because even if you don't believe anything that Jason said, at least at a minimum, I think there's things in there that'll be eye-opening to you on, what the grading process looked like 20 years ago. Why, people like Evan are comfortable saying it's okay to trim cards, because according to him, you go to PSA 20 years ago and they've got, all these issues where trim cards were basically flooding through their doors and they did nothing about it and they didn't care. So it's BAU for them. It's their problem. It's what their business process was built on. It's what their foundations are. So that's why he's okay with it. There's all these things that if you're maybe new to the hobby, or you're somebody like me that's been around the hobby, their whole life, but hasn't really graded a whole lot of cards because it was either too expensive or you don't think it's the thing to be doing with your cards. I'm somebody that likes to keep my cards raw for the most part. That's going to be eye-opening to you to get some insight into what the grading, landscape looked like 15, 20 years ago. So I know I'm going on this tangent, but I think it's just a really interesting thing to check out. The live stream was pretty cool. I don't think there was anything else that was, worth talking about on this one. I hope you liked the video. Let me know your thoughts. If you did see the live, I think it's pretty good if you've got, 2.5 hours to kill, either doing, chores around the house, doing some garden work, doing some stuff in the garage, whatever it is you want to be doing at the gym. It's a good listen because there's lots of really tough questions that I thought were really cool. Now, again, you can say what you want about Jason. You can say what you want about Evan. You can even say what you want about Jeremy Lee, because each of these guys do have haters, like I have haters too. But this kind of discussion is good for the hobby. I do not agree with anything that Evan said. I do not agree with a lot of the things that Jason said, but it was also good to sort of get that response from them and get, the dialogue going, because that kind of discussion, I'll say once again, is what this hobby needs more and more, because there's too much money these days and there's too much, hanky-panky going on with some of these businesses and, shutting their lips and not telling us what's really happening. So it is what it is. I hope you liked the video and I will see you, in the next one. Cheers.